The sinking of the Titanic in 1912 is still known as one of the worst marine tragedies in history. The Titanic, despite being thought to be unsinkable, sank on its first journey, serving as a testament to the opulence and grandeur of the time. Over the years, many teams have gone deep into the ocean to look at the wreckage and figure out what it all means. In this journey, researchers have found creepy and haunting objects that give a glimpse of the lives lost and the stories that will stay with the ship as long as it stays underwater. From creepy personal items to pieces of the once luxurious interiors, the Titanic's watery grave has turned up a number of scary things that continue to fascinate people around the world. In this piece, we look at 7 of the most haunting and unsettling things found on the Titanic's ocean floor. These finds put light on the human tragedy and the chilling events that happened after that night. First, a written account of how the lifeboat was found. The finding of 3 bodies is described as gruesome in an unnamed oceanic passenger's writing account of the lifeboat rescue. According to the report, 2 Titanic firemen's bodies were stuck under the lifeboat seats, and 1 corpse was wearing a dinner jacket. According to the note, a woman's ring was also discovered on board the lifeboat. One of the body's arms had fallen off into the hands of the Oceanic's boarding officer. It gives a very detailed story of the healing. The Titanic was called the Ship of Dreams, but this is the Ship of Nightmares. Andrew Aldridge of Henry Aldridge and Son told FoxNews.com. It shows how terrible a disaster can be at its worst. A number of passengers on the Titanic made it to the collapsible lifeboat when it washed off the ship's deck and partly submerged, but not all of them survived. The bodies discovered by the Oceanic were left on the lifeboat after the survivors of Collapsible A were picked up by another lifeboat. Encyclopedia Titanica says that the corpse in the dinner jacket belonged to a first-class guest named Thompson Beatty. The wedding ring belonged to Ellen Gerda Lindell, a Swedish passenger who made it briefly to Collapsible A before dying. Before he died on Collapsible A, Ellen's husband Edward was holding her ring. His body was never found. Number 2. The Titanic's hull. From the ocean floor, the RMS Titanic's hull would be recovered in pieces. A section of the ship's bow, which is about 25 feet long and weighs about 15 tons, is the biggest piece of the ship's hull that was recovered. A section of the ship's keel and parts of the ship's stern were among the other parts of the hull that were recovered. Due to the corrosive effects of salt water and the pressure of the deep ocean, the hull sections that were recovered were in poor condition. They had a lot of rust and seaweed growing on them, and many of the skeletal parts were badly destroyed. Despite the hull section's bad condition, they were still able to tell us a lot about the ship's hull and design. Insight into the damage brought on by the collision with the iceberg was also provided by the recovered sections of the hull. Researchers were able to look at where the ice hit the hull and how much damage it did. The damage caused by the collision helped to confirm the official story of the disaster because it was consistent with the evidence of its survivors. The sections of the hull that were recovered helped to explain the events of the disaster itself, in addition to giving information about its design and construction. The location and condition of the ship sections recovered would help to confirm the official account of the sinking, including the collision of the ship and the trajectory of the ship as it sank. Some of the unanswered questions about the disaster were also helped by the recovered hull sections. For example, the condition of the ship's recovered hull sections would help to confirm that the ship did, in fact, break in half before sinking to the bottom, as some survivors had described. Number 3. Letters recovered. A glimpse into the lives of the passengers and crew who were on board the Titanic would be given by the numerous letters and postcards that would be recovered from its wreckage. Some of those letters were written by passengers to their loved ones back home. They talked about their experiences on the ship and their future plans. Crew members would also write letters to their families describing their work on the ship and their feelings toward the journey. A postcard made by Isidore Strauss, co-owner of Macy's department store, to his wife, Ida, is one of the most famous letters recovered from the Titanic. He wrote the letter right before the ship hit the iceberg, and it was found in his pocket after the sinking. Another letter is from a guest called Alexander Oscar Holverson, who wrote to his mother about his time on the ship and his plans for the future. A moving glimpse into the thoughts and feelings of a man who knew he was about to die was given by this letter, which was found in his pocket after his death. Overall, the letters and postcards recovered from the Titanic provide a unique glimpse into the lives and experiences of the people on board the ship and continue to be an important part of the history record of the disaster. Number 4. A pair of binoculars. The fact that a pair of binoculars were found in the crow's nest of the Titanic's wreckage is a sad reminder of how a lack of equipment and communication led to the disaster. The location on the ship where the lookouts were stationed was known as the crow's nest, and it was their job to keep an eye out for any possible dangers, like icebergs. It is well known that the lookouts weren't using the binoculars at the time of the collision. The binoculars were locked in a cupboard, but the key was stolen. One of the main things that led to the disaster has been considered to be the fact that the officer in charge of the lookouts did not provide these binoculars. The age of the iceberg and other items recovered from the wreckage serve as a reminder of the lessons that can be learned from the tragedy and the significance of proper equipment and communication in preventing similar disasters from occurring in the future, because the lookouts were unable to spot the iceberg in time to avoid the collision. Number 5. A violin belonging to the band leader, Wallace Hartley. A well-known item recovered from the wreckage of the ship is the violin that belonged to Wallace Hartley. In an effort to calm the passengers as the ship was sinking, Wallace Hartley and his fellow band members played music. People say that Hartley and his band played the song "Nearer, My God, to Thee" as the ship sank. When Hartley's body was found by the cable ship Mackay Bennett, the violin would be recovered with it. It was returned to his fiancée, Maria Robinson, who sold it at an auction later on. It was later bought by a person who didn't want to be known. It was put on display in a number of shows, but no one knows where it is now. The violin has become a symbol of the heroism and selflessness of the crew members who stayed on board the ship to help others even as it was sinking. It's a reminder of the bravery and sacrifice of Hartley and the other band members, who played music to keep the passengers' spirits up until the very end. The violin is also a symbol of the Titanic disaster's human tragedy, serving as a strong reminder of the lives lost and the heroism of those who try to help others in the face of such a terrible event. Number 6. The wool vest. A wool vest recovered from Titanic wreckage is a rare and expensive artifact from one of the most famous shipwrecks in history. The vest is made of high-quality wool, and it is thought that a first-class guest on the doomed journey wore it. The vest is in good condition and still has the scars and wear from the night the Titanic hit an iceberg and sank, claiming the lives of more than 1,500 people. William Henry Allen was a third-class passenger who died in the disaster. He owned this wool vest. At an exhibition held before the auction of the artifacts in 2012, the vest was discovered in his suitcase and looked pressed and ready to wear. Also recovered from the wreckage were Allen's dress boots. A visible reminder of the luxury and opulence of the Titanic and the lifestyle of its rich passengers at the time is the vest. The Titanic was considered the most luxurious and technologically advanced ship in the world, and its passengers included some of the richest and most famous people of the time. The vest is a testament to the skill and care that went into making clothes during that time period. The wool vest is now a very important piece of history and is on display in a museum. The artifact is carefully kept and protected to honor those who lost their lives on the ship and to keep the memory of the terrible event living. This vest is now a symbol of the luxury and opulence of the ship and its passengers, serving as a reminder of the human tragedy of the disaster and an important historical artifact that is now on display for everyone to see, carefully preserved and protected over time, so that this tragic event may never be forgotten and to honor the passengers who lost their lives in the disaster. Number 7. Samuel Ernest Hemming's keys. Another set of keys goes to Samuel Ernest Hemming, a lamp trimmer on the RMS Titanic who survived the disaster and later testified before the U.S. Senate inquiry into the ship's sinking. Hemming had been a sailor from the time he was 15 years old until he retired at the age of 43. When the Titanic left port, a set of Titanic keys would sell at Christie's auction in London for $26,400, which was more than twice what they were expected to bring. During the investigation, he said that his job was to mix paint and do things like that for the ship, take care of all the decks, trim all the lamps, and make sure they're in working order, and put the lights on at nighttime and turn them off at dawn. Hemming was woken up by the impact of the iceberg, and he discovered air escaping from the exhaust tank, according to his story. He returned to his bunk after telling his top officer about the ship's stem, but he was unsure of how long it was.